Hi, welcome to today's video. In today's video, we are going to be making up the Mabel by Swoon. I've made mine in this metallic green. It's like an olive green, very light olive green. And I have added a crossbody strap to mine. So I will show you how to attach the D-rings with rivets, and I have another video that I will link in the description showing you how I make crossbody straps. But yeah, it's such a cute little bag. Like, how gorgeous is this? I love the colour. I've had this fabric for absolutely ages, didn't know what to make with it, and then when I was deciding to make this bag, came across this fabric in my stash, and I just thought that is so pretty. I thought that's going to make a lovely Mabel. So I'll show you the inside. So the inside is this water resistant canvas. The two little birds, they're not 100% centered, but I was very short on fabric. The inside bit is beige, the gusset, because again I was very short on fabric, so I had to compromise and choose a matching coordinating fabric for the gusset. But it's just such a cute, gorgeous little bag. I absolutely love it. And like I say, with the crossbody strap as well, it does just make it so much more versatile. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so we'll go through the pattern pieces and the hardware that I'm going to use for the Mabel. So first of all, we have the handle piece. I have already attached my stabilizer. The pattern does say to insert it afterwards, but I attach it before I start. I literally line the centre up and put it against that centre mark. We then have the two exterior pieces, front and back. These have been stabilised with Decaville. Obviously the pieces are in the pattern that for the Decaville, so yeah, you have separate pattern pieces for your exterior and then the Decaville piece. I actually mark the line of 1/2 inch all the way around, so that I know that I am putting my Decaville exactly where it needs to be. It's not too far one way and not enough the other, so that does really help to line it all up. And then we have the two lining pieces to match. I am using water resistant canvas, so I haven't interfaced mine. If you were using a cotton for your lining, then use something like a woven interfacing to interface that. Something like an SF101, G700, or I would use the medium weight interfacing that I have on my website. We then have our gusset pieces, our exterior and our lining. I didn't have enough of this lining to, sorry, I didn't have enough of this fabric to cut out the lining of the gusset piece, so I've gone with the beige to complement it. And then I have attached my stabilizer piece to my gusset in exactly the same way. I've marked my 1/2 inch and I've lined the stabilizer up to that. And then we have our flat pieces. So this exterior has been stabilized. It gives you full instructions in the instructions of how to attach these pieces. So where you need to mark to place in your first piece, and then the distance you need to leave before you place your second piece. So it's very easy to follow. It's very like an easy explanation. So that has been stabilized. So it basically creates a natural fold for this piece. And then the matching lining. Obviously this has been cut because it's a directional print, sort of kind of upside down, but obviously it's not. I have to think about when the flap is opened, which way I want the fabric to face, so I cut it in that way. I then have the magnetic snap. I've got an 18mm magnetic snap. That is just my personal preference. You could use a 14mm. I think it would hold up if the magnetic snap was strong enough, but I prefer 18mm snaps. I'm also going to attach some D-rings because I want to be able to attach a crossbody strap to this bag. but I'll show you how I do that, and I've got rivets to help me attach those D-rings. I'm going to make a start by putting the magnetic snap in place, and there is measurements in the pattern piece, so I'm going to follow those. Just need my other ruler. There we go. So I have all of my centres marked on all of my pattern pieces. I did that as I was cutting out and stabilising it. So if you haven't got your centres marked, mark them either before you start or as you go, because it will make a difference and it will help you get everything to line up. I'm going to attach the female portion of the snap to the panel of the bag, so the main body of the bag, and I'm going to do that by lining up my ruler with the centre mark and come down by 2 inches and make a mark. I am then going to line the washer of the snap up, and that mark I've made, that sort of centre circle, I'm going to line that up with the mark I've made, and then just mark those 2 little slits. And I'm going to cut them through. I actually like to attach some glue when I'm attaching hardware as well. So I just place a little bit on the back, not loads, because you don't want it spilling out, but it just helps the hardware grip a little bit. And feed those prongs through that hole I've made. Obviously there is stabilizer on this already, so you don't need to add any extra. Fit your washer and push your prongs. I push mine out. If you want to push yours into the center, that's absolutely fine. So I'm just using a little bit of tape over the back of those prongs just to protect the lining and the fabric inside. So that is our magnetic snap attached. And then I'm going to do the same on the flat piece and attach the other part of the snap. So from the top part, so the bit that will come over and fold, again I'm going to line up my ruler with one of the marks into the center, and we need to come down by 1.5 inches. So I'm going to mark that. Hopefully I'll be able to see that. Yeah. And then I'm going to mark those lines. I'm just going to flick through them the same way that we did before. Now obviously this doesn't have any Decaville on it because the Decaville is on the other piece. So I'm just going to use a little scrap of Decaville behind that hardware just to help sort of stabilize this hardware and just sort of protect the fabric. So like I did before, a little bit of glue, doesn't need to be loads. And then just place that Decaville over the prongs before you fit your washer. So that's a magnetic snap fitted. I'm going to move on to assembling the flap, and I'm just trying to decide where to put my tag, and I'm thinking I might put it on this part here because obviously that's a bit that's going to be showing. Yeah, I will. Right, I'm going to work out some measurements. I'm going to line up from my centre mark, kind of where I want that fitted. And then I know where the prongs sort of sit when on these back plates, so I know which like slits to mark. So I must have marked the wrong slit. That's better. So just gonna pop the backing plate on, make sure that that is nice and square, and then again pop some tape on the back just to protect the fabric on the inside. So we're going to put right sides together. I'm going to match my centres and just put some clips to keep them in place. And then just using some clips all the way around. Just to keep it in place, I'm going to sew round that seam at 1/2 inch. All of the seam allowances are 1/2 inch. I will be constructing at 2.5 inches, not 2.5 inches, that would be absolutely crazy. I will be constructing at a 2.5 stitch length, and then my top stitching is usually 4.5. So if you see me flicking between the two stitch lengths, that's what I'm doing. You can use a seam guide if you want to help you maintain accuracy with your seams. And I'm just keeping hold of the tails of my thread so I don't get any nesting underneath. And then I'm just going to go and trim that seam back by about half with my pinking shears. So I've trimmed that seam back with my pinking shears, and I'm just going to turn this through. And I'm just going to use my fingers to roll this seam out, obviously because it's vinyl. Can't really use an iron. So I always like to put a few clips in this top seam, get them to meet up, because what it does is it makes that seam sit nice and flat. It stops the lining from rolling towards the exterior. So I'm going to push that down and pop a clip in, and I'm just going to use a few clips wherever I put them, just to keep that in place for when I'm top stitching. So just going to top stitch all the way around the outside and along the top edge. So I'll do that at 1/8 of an inch away from the seam. So that is our flap finished. So now we can move on to our handle. So I've just put some double-sided tape along each edge, but not put any in the seams at the short edge. So just on either side of that middle line, and I'm just going to fold up to that line, but not over it. And then the same on this side. So using that Deborah light to kind of fold against, I'm folding all the way along. So then what we need to do is we need to fold the strap back on itself, so right sides together and short edges. We are going to sew that at a 1/2 inch seam allowance on either side. So once that's been done, I'm just going to reduce the bulk a little bit in these corners. So basically from the stitch line, I'm just going to reduce a tiny little bit of the bulk, but just making sure that I don't cut through those stitches. Obviously, if you're using quite thick vinyl, you might not be able to do this, so you might need to maybe make your strap in a different fabric. If you are making this pattern for the first time, probably something like a cotton is a really good idea. So I'm just opening out that seam and using my finger to push it through. I'm just going to take off a little bit more of that seam, just to try and reduce the bulk a little bit more. Probably taking it down to about 1/4 inch, maybe it's just a bit under. Just making sure I'm getting rid of those little edges of the thread. And then we're going to fold over the strap so that the raw edges meet. So I'm just going to put some clips in. And once I'm happy with that, we're going to do some top stitching. I'm just going to make sure that these corners are all pushed out nicely and they're nice and straight. And then we are going to top stitch all the way around the handle. So I'm going to start probably about 2 inches down from the end of the strap and start my top stitching there. and I'm going to stop just shy of where that seam is. Maybe it's one more stitch, and then come along that short edge, and I'm just going to use my single stitches because I want to make sure that I get it exactly where I want it to be. I'm just going to use a little bit of vinyl behind just to protect where that seam's a little bit bulky, because I am using a walking foot. I don't want the walking foot to eat my vinyl, basically. And I'm just using my hand lever and my uptake lever to kind of position where I want the corner to be, because the stitching isn't making it sort of fit exactly. So that my corners are exactly where I want to be, I'm just using my wheel and lifting my foot to get it where I want it to be. So I'm going to thread through these loose threads into the centre seam. So it's literally a case of taking the thread, putting it through the needle, feeding it back through the stitch point and pulling it into that centre part. So I'm going to do the same with all 4 threads. So once you've got all 4 threads pulled through to the centre part, we're just going to knot them. Cut the threads back, and then I use sort of the eye part of my needle to push that knot down into that seam. So that you can't see it and you get a nice finish. You can't see where the stitching starts and ends. So we move on to attaching the handle to the flap. So we need to make some marks. So we are going to mark 1.5 inches down by 1 inch in, and I'm just going to mark a little sort of angle there so I know where I'm going up to. Right. Just making sure that they're both the same. That one's quite light. I'm just going to redo that one. Right. So if you were wanting to just sew your handle on and not attach D-rings, this would be the point where you would line up the edge here basically 1/2 inch away by 1.5 inches down, and you will sew a little 5/8 of an inch box here, and then you will do the same on this side, and that would attach the handle to the flap. Obviously I'm going to be using D-rings, so I'm going to use rivets to attach the handle and also secure those D-rings. So I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to start on this side and I'm going to mark my first rivet placement, and then I'm going to kind of do the same on the other side so I can kind of match up and they're even. I am doing it by eye a little bit, and then I'm just going to get my punch. 2 seconds. So holding that in place and popping it onto my mat, I am going to punch a hole through all layers. Now it might not go through all layers, so you might have to do it in 2 parts. But when you go through the first part, it'll usually mark on the underneath where you need to continue to go through. So I'm going to set my first rivet. Well, I'm going to put my first rivet in place, should I say. And then I'm just going to slide my D-ring on. And then I think I'm going to want my other D-ring, my other rivet about here. So I'm just sort of looking at that. I don't want the D-ring to be able to move too much, but I don't want so much tension on it that it's going to pull and possibly, you know, rip or destroy the bag. So I'm just going to take that off. I'm going to measure the distance between those 2 points. It's about 3/4 of an inch. And I'm going to mark my other spot on the other side so that they're nice and even. So I'm going to go back and put this rivet in. And I'm going to set this first rivet. I want to make sure that it's nice and straight. I don't want to be setting this so that the handle's sort of on an angle. I want it to be nice and straight. And then I'm going to slide my I'll tell you what I'm going to do first is I'm going to punch my holes. Again, making sure that that edge of this handle is lining up with that mark that I made earlier on. And I'm going to punch through. Making sure it's gone through all layers. Pull my D-ring on and set my second rivet. Again, I'm just making sure that that is lined up nicely. I think I'm going to change my mind on the size D-ring that I've got. 2 seconds. So I didn't think I had any 20 mil 3/4 of an inch D-rings, but I have. So I thought I only had 1 inch, but I've just been and double checked, and I did find some 20 mil 3/4 inch D-rings, and I think they're going to be much better. Yeah, they look so much better. Much happier with that. So I'm just going to fit this rivet. And again, when I'm setting it, I'm just making sure that that strap is nice and even. I'm not happy with that rivet, so I'm going to take it out and do it again. The benefit of not fully setting your rivets when you first are doing them is that they come out a lot easier if you aren't happy with them. So I'm going to do that one again. And then we're going to move on to the other side. So I'm just going to line up this edge with that mark that we made before, and I'm going to make the holes. Obviously I can make both of the holes at the same time now because I know where I'm going. I'm just making sure it's gone all the way through. So I'm going to fit that first rivet. Let's get another back out, seeing as I threw that one away. Again, just making sure it's all lined up as we go. So that is the D-rings added to my bag, and that means now that I can put a crossbody strap onto my bag and wear it as a crossbody strap. So moving on to the exterior, we're going to attach the gusset to the front and the back. So I'm just going to pop one piece out of the way for now, and taking my gusset piece and my front piece, I am going to match my centres. And I'm just clipping along where it's straight. And then I'm going to come round to this top edge and clip that in place. And I'm going to clip to roughly where it starts to curve, and then I'm going to do exactly the same on this side. So it looks like these pieces won't meet because it looks like this piece is bigger than this piece. But what we're going to do is we're going to make some little clips into the gusset, not into your front or back piece, into your gusset at around about 1 centimetre intervals and just about 3 mil. And then we are going to manipulate those edges together, and they will sit really nicely. And that's how I fit gussets to all of my bags. I clip the straight parts, then I know which parts need to be manipulated in together, and then I just work with them. So that's how I do it for this bag, for any bag that has a gusset in it. So I'm just going to repeat that step on the other side. And clip that in place, and then we're going to sew with the 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. If you find it difficult to keep to the 1/2 inch seam allowance without, especially at these corners, without them meeting, without them shifting, meeting, what am I talking about? Sew it first, so sort of like baste it in place, if you like, at 1/4 inch, and then go in and do your proper seam at 1/2 inch, because you're going to trim it back anyway. And you will find that it's slightly easier to sew a gusset or this type of sort of seam at 1/4 inch. It'll stay in place better. So that is a little bit of a tip, especially if you are a new bag maker and you do find sewing these types of seams difficult. You will find that that will help. Another thing that will also help is using something like a stiletto to help keep the pieces together and in place. So I'm going to put my piece underneath and drop my needle so that it holds it in place, and then keeping my seam guide in place, I'm going to sew all the way around at a 1/2 inch. I'm just going to check that I'm happy with that. Oh, I thought I had a little tuck there, but I haven't. And there isn't any tucks in that seam. Because it's vinyl, and sometimes with vinyl your stitches can sometimes see when you know that bag has been pulled through. I always do a second row of stitching just slightly behind the original row of stitching, like, you know, 1/16 of an inch, just to reinforce the bag. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And then I'm going to trim back this seam to about half with my pinking shears. So obviously if you've done sort of that original basting stitch at a 1/4 inch, that'll be pretty much trim back when you trim this seam back with your pinking shears. So that's now been trimmed back. I've been very careful not to cut through any of my stitching, and I'm going to repeat exactly the same thing on the other side. So I'll talk you through fitting the gusset again if it's helpful. So match my seams, I clip the straight edges, I meet the top edges, on both sides, and then I clip into the gusset. Remember, the gusset, not the front or the back pieces. And then I manipulate them into place. And then I'm just going to sew around this exactly the same way that I did the first seam. I'm going to stitch around at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to run a second row of stitching just behind that original row of stitching, just for reinforcement. So that is the exterior done, and I'm going to turn this through. And I'm just going to use my fingers to push out all of these seams. And I'm just making sure that I'm happy with everything. I have already checked the seams and I'm happy that I haven't got any tucks or ripples in my gusset. One thing to help do that, if you always, when you're sewing that seam, if you sew with the flat piece, so either the front or the back on the bottom, and then you have the gusset on the top, it's much easier to sort of feed that excess in when you can see the excess. If you do it the other way around, you're much more likely to get tucks and ripples in the bag. So yeah, so I'm just pushing that through, and I am using my fingers to roll these seams out. and the bag is really starting to come together. I'm going to baste the flap onto the exterior. So this needs to go on with the side that doesn't have the magnetic snap. And I'm just going to meet my centres. And clip it in place. And then I'm just going to baste this in place just with a basting stitch. So then we're going to move on to our interior, and we just repeat the process exactly the same way as what we've just done. We attach the gusset to the front and the back of the interior. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So that's the lining all sewn together. I have trimmed back my seams with the pinking shears, and I'm just going to turn it right side through as well. And we are nearly ready to construct the finishing parts of the bag. I'm just sort of finger pressing these seams out, and I'm just making sure that I'm happy with all of them seams. I'll turn that back through. So we are on the home straight and we are ready to put the bag together. So we start with the exterior, wrong side in, and interior, right side out. And we are literally going to drop the interior into the exterior like so. And we are going to match up those seams, and we can butterfly them so that it isn't too bulky. And I match each of the seams first before I do anything else. So just go all the way around, making sure that those seams are all together. and then matching my centres, and then clipping the rest of the way around so that that is all in place. So we are going to leave a turning hole at the front. So I'm making a mark to remind myself to do it, because the amount of times I haven't and I've had to unpick is unreal. So actually I should have done that on the inside, because that's how I'm going to sew it. So I'm literally going to sew all the way around at the same 1/2 inch seam allowance, and leaving this gap at the top, remembering to back stitch at the beginning and at the end to reinforce that seam. Now when I'm back to the start, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to stitch that seam again, just within that seam allowance, just like I did on the exterior of the vinyl, just to give a little bit extra reinforcement. Obviously remembering to leave that turning down. So now what we're going to do is turn the bag through. So I always kind of pull the flap through first and then reach through for the bottom of the bag, and just being very, very gentle, very careful, because the last thing that you want to do when you've spent a long time making something so pretty is for it to tear. And then again, just using my fingers to flatten out them seams and get them as flat as I possibly can. The top stitching, so I'll pull the bag through this way to top stitch, because I am obviously on a flatbed, so I don't have a free arm to top stitch with, so it is much more difficult to top stitch a bag this sort of small on a flatbed, so I do find it easier to do it this way. And what I'm going to do now is, you might have seen I had some lines marked, so these are 1-inch lines, so I'm going to fold that exterior down because that will give me the 1/2 inch that I need to create the nice even seam at the top. And then I do the same with the lining. I've also got a 1/2 inch mark there, so I'll just pop a couple of clips in. And then I'm just going to meet those seams together. So I've just matched up those seams where I've folded them and used lots and lots of clips to keep it in place. And I'm just going to use a few clips on this side as well, just that when I'm top stitching everything stays in place. and then we're ready to go ahead and top stitch all the way around the top, and then turn our bag through and it's finished. So starting with long tails so that I can keep a hold of them to prevent nesting, I am going to drop my needle into one of those seams, and then I'm going to top stitch extremely slowly all the way around the top of this bag, and I'll be back in a minute. And when I get to this part here, what I'm doing is I'm keeping this bottom, the lining pulled taut, and then I'm using my fingers to kind of pull these seams apart so that it doesn't roll, and I'll keep stopping just to make sure that that lining hasn't tucked itself back under again. And like I say, it's just worth taking your time over. So that's my top stitching all complete. Before I turn the bag through, I am just going to feed those ends through to the middle of the seam like I did when I did the handle. So I'll come back to you in a second once I've done that. So I fed those threads through into the middle, tied them off and pushed the ends back in this exactly the same way that I did with the handle. Now I just need to turn it the right way. Obviously if you've got a free arm you won't need to do this because you'll have been able to top stitch, or if you're really lucky and got a compound foot. So I'm just going to push all of these seams out. And what I'm going to be doing, because this does have a lot of decafill in it, because it's been turned, it will crease. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stuff this with some tea towels and use a press cloth and give it a steam and an iron, and that will flatten it all out. I'll probably leave it for a day or two after it's been pressed, let it sort of dry, and then those creases should sort of come out, or it definitely won't be as creased. So I hope you've enjoyed my little sew along on the Mabel by Swoon. Please do drop a comment in the comments box down below and let me know what your fabric choices would be for this bag. If you've enjoyed the video, please do consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel. And until next time, see you soon. Bye.